Today on the Business Builders podcast, we're talking with Tony Mackay about his perspective on leadership development based on his experience in the Australian Army. Ron talks about an opportunity he lost through neglecting to develop his staff, and I give a personal insight about where I originally learned about leadership. Welcome to the Business Builders podcast, where each fortnight we bring you insights that will help you succeed in business. We're your hosts. I'm Brenton Gowland.
And I'm Ron Tomlin. Now this week, Brenton, we have Tony Mackay joining us to speak about leadership development, which is a key practice that will help us grow our businesses.
And Tony, of course, is one of the hosts from SA Business Builders, the networking group that we are all a part of, and the networking group that's actually inspired this podcast. Now, Tony will be bringing us a perspective on leadership development that comes from a foundation of over 21 years service in the Australian Army. Tony worked in various engineering, logistics, project management, advisory and leadership roles during his time with the Army, which included 5 years service with the 5th and 7th Battalion Mechanised Infantry. Tony also served 3 years with the 4th Battalion Commando Unit and has deployed overseas on active service. Tony discharged from the Army as a Warrant Officer Class 1 in 2008 and has since held senior roles within federal government, including as Director of Governance and Innovation and Chief of Staff at the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency.
Try saying that 3 times quickly.
Oh mate, it's a mouthful. But anyway, more recently, Tony has been the business unit leader for the APP Corporation here in Adelaide and is now the Defence Business Development Manager for Ventia, Australia's 4th largest defence contractor. In 2014, Tony started InSync Management Solutions as a means of sharing the knowledge and experience he gained during his military career, blended with his public service and private industry experience. So I'm sure our discussion is going to be jam-packed with insights for you, our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to hearing what Tony has to say, but let's start with a couple of quick messages from our sponsors.
Absolutely.
Today's episode is sponsored by Nucleus Creative Agency. Now, as we discussed in our last episode, research shows that the average person is bombarded with somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 advertising marketing messages every single week in Australia. And in amongst that sea of clutter, it can be quite difficult to make your brand, your products, your services, and your messages stand out from the pack. As a result, it can take a great deal of effort, time, and money to get people to visit your website, to win a meeting, or to engage with your story. So it's critically important when they do arrive at your website or engage with you, that story that you're offering and your brand all work together to connect with your audience and inspire them to start a conversation with you. Because let's face it, you don't often get a second chance. Now, the team at Nucleus have a complete suite of integrated agency services to help you tell your story and a strong track record of helping their clients grow their business and achieve their objectives. So if you need help selling your products and services, developing your website, creating engaging video experiences, educating your market, or developing your brand, Nucleus can help you. So please visit www.nucleus.com.au to see how they've helped other businesses just like yours.
Absolutely. And if you'd like any advice from our team at Nucleus or you want to have a discussion, please just get in touch using the contact form on the Nucleus website, and either myself or one of our team will be more than happy to arrange a meeting. Now, of course, our other sponsor is SA Business Builders. And of course, as I said earlier, SA Business Builders inspired this podcast. Now, SA Business Builders are a social group that facilitate events that encourage the development of high-quality relationships between skilled business professionals in order to inspire friendships, opportunities, initiatives, and business growth. So each month, SA Business Builders run an event here in Adelaide, South Australia, where we get around 60 to 80 people together for social events where we hear about relevant business topics that are relevant to us in business today. And if you'd like to attend, please just reach out to either Ron, myself, or in fact our guest Tony Mackay, because we're all SA Business Builders hosts and we would love to chat. And you can reach us on LinkedIn or any of the normal channels. Now, if you're listening from abroad or interstate and you're coming to South Australia, we'd certainly love to meet with you and get you involved. However, we'd encourage you to check out some of the great networking groups that are in your area. But if you're in South Australia, of course, SA Business Builders is definitely an event you should look at. And interestingly enough, Ron, we've had people contacting us from the podcast asking to come along.
That's fantastic, isn't it? That stuff out in the media really does work.
Well, apparently people are listening to us. We better be on point.
Well,
Lucky we've got Tony here today.
I was just going to say, with Tony here, we'll have to stay on point. So with that, it's now time to hear from our guests. Hello, Tony.
G'day, Ron. G'day, Brenton. It is fantastic to be here.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the Business Builders podcast, and what a great topic, one that's very dear to my heart. Now, from knowing you, it's clear that you've got a passion for leadership development. So where did that come from?
Right. Well, I guess it all started back in 1988 when I joined the Army at the ripe old age of 17 and a half. And at 17 and a half, I was actually pretty old for an apprentice who joined the Army. The majority of the people I joined with were 15 and 9 months old when they signed up and had just turned 16 when they actually started as soldiers.
So you were the wisdom of the group, were you?
Well, it's interesting you should say that because I was sort of recognised, I guess, to have some leadership potential, and it may have been the fact that I was a year and a half older than a lot of the other guys. So, that probably led to me maybe displaying a little bit more maturity than some of the other guys, and being identified for honorary rank as a what they call an apprentice sergeant major. So with that role, I had responsibility for looking after about 100 apprentices, soldiers, and that included, sort of marching them around, looking after their admin, and even included discipline. So, at the age of 18, I was, leading parades and marching people around and looking after their welfare.
Well, it sounds like you were destined for leadership, Tony. That's actually really impressive.
Got a taste for it.
Yeah, good. So you left the military after 21 years. Can you tell us and our listeners what happened after you left and what inspired you to want to share the lessons you've learned in the military with the private sector?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess I experienced some, I thought, really good leadership when I was in the military. And when I left, I saw some gaps in capability, in leadership capability. And I kind of wondered why that was. And it became obvious to me that people hadn't had the same level of training that what you get in the military. So I thought there's an opportunity here to share what I'd learned in the military. And I was in some relatively senior roles straight out of the military. So I took it on myself to do a bit of mentoring of some of the junior staff and also of other staff that or other people that I'd met through networking. And I did that for quite a while just as to help people out. And eventually it sort of grew into in-sync management solutions where I was, doing it for commission as well. So
yeah, and interestingly enough, we spend a lot of time with different people who've been ex-military service people who've actually gone into leadership roles. And there seems to be some sort of, as in teaching other people about leadership, so there seems to be some sort of correlation between what you learn in the military and actually being able to, for certain people, obviously, to be able to then inspire and teach others how to lead. So can you tell us about how that comes about?
Yeah, look, the military has a very deliberate approach to training, and that extends to leadership training. So there are two streams that you have within the military. There's the other ranks stream and then there's the officer stream. So I went down the other ranks stream, but we'll talk about the officer stream because that's probably more relevant. So the officers join the military as cadets and go through some training at either ADFA or I'm talking Army here.
What's ADFA?
The Australian Defence Force Academy.
Yeah. So our listeners might not know the acronym, so we'll have to.
Well, it used to be known as Duntroon.
No, Duntroon is a separate organisation. Yeah, so the Royal Military College Duntroon is the more regimental side. So you can go to the Australian Defence Force Academy and do academic degrees and the like. And some do both. So they'll go through ADFA and they'll go through RMC. Others may just go through RMC,
which is
the Royal Military College Duntroon.
Got it.
Thank you. And they spend a couple of years learning the theories of leadership and practicing that within a safe environment. And then they are commissioned normally as lieutenants, and they go out to units. And then once they are in units, normally as a lieutenant, they will be a platoon commander, and they'll have 30 soldiers that work for them. In amongst those 30 soldiers, they'll have a platoon sergeant. Now, the platoon sergeant is an experienced soldier who has upward of 10 years of experience already, and has been a corporal, so he's been in charge of leading a section of 9 people himself. So he's got actual real world military training, and leadership experience. So one of the key roles of the sergeant is to act as a mentor for the lieutenant, and there's a very honest, open, and frank relationship that they have, and that's something I don't tend to see so much much in industry. You don't tend to have people who have a secondary role to be a deliberate mentor for people who are in leadership roles.
It tends to be a bit more accidental than anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to hear you talk about the concept of servant leadership, something that I'm passionate about, in relation to military, because I think most people have the view that the military is all about command and control. And quite frankly, in a modern society, even in the military, I can't see how that can work. And you've just cleared that up.
The military is very much a servant leadership organisation. In fact, probably next to the church, it's probably the leader in that space. And it's a real. I have this conversation with people all the time. They really don't understand. They watch movies, mainly American style movies, and they see Full Metal Jacket and things like that, and they think that there's all this yelling and everything. And there's an amount of that, especially during the initial training. You've got to break people down and build them up into the mold that you want them to end up in. But the reality is that we have a very small military, and we can't afford to operate in a war of attrition style where we just yell at people and tell them to go off and do things. We need to have people who can think and contribute to the plan, and it is very much a servant leadership methodology. And to the point where one of the things that got me into the leadership space was that coming up and becoming a sergeant and doing a bit of research and understanding that even the word sergeant is derived from the Latin serviens, which means to serve.
Interesting.
And it's
sorry.
Well, no, it's very interesting because when we talk about people going to different places and they're deployed, they talk about their service. That was their service to the country. So it's a very interesting kind of point you make there, because everything we talk about in army or in defence is they're serving their country.
It's absolutely a service, and that was another point I was going to make. So thank you for bringing that up. It is a service, even it's one of the things I felt when I left the military was that there was something missing, and that was that service piece. And I looked for something to do to allow me to continue to provide a service, which is why I became a Justice of the Peace.
Yeah, great. So you were talking about that piece was missing. Are you talking about in the corporate world?
Just generally, I think for me, having spent 21 years serving, you don't stop serving when you finish that job.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think the common perspective of business is about service, but the truth of the matter is, in a modern environment with employees who require you to, as a leader, to provide them with guidance and support, it is a service. I'd like to think of leaders as the people who are serving their people.
Absolutely.
And their people are serving the customer.
Well, it's interesting when you think about it, because it's our job to remove all the blockers for our staff to be able to do their job and serve our clients, yes? So our job as leaders is really to guide them and to create a way for them to effectively work for our clients.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
So, Tony, what do you see as a key message for leaders who do want to take on this service role in terms of developing upcoming leaders within their organisation or within their ranks, if you like?
Yeah, great question, Ron. The thing that I would say is that there's the Peters principle, which is that people rise to the level of their incompetence effectively. It's been a known thing for quite a while, but there's also this concept around taking 10,000 hours to become an expert in anything. And one of the things that I find is that through the military, we deliberately train leaders from the day they join, and mentor them all the way through the journey so that they're effective leaders. And there are only two types of leaders. There are effective leaders and non-effective leaders or ineffective leaders. So the point I'm making here is that if you want to train people in your organisation to be effective leaders, you've got to start their leadership journey at the start, not when they're appointed.
What do you mean by at the start?
So people tend to start off in a role, a technical role, and then over time they're recognised for their, the work they do. They may do some more courses, technical courses. They become, really proficient at their job. They rise to a certain level, and all of a sudden they're promoted so that they're now looking after people. And that's a very different set of skills from what they've been training in their technical roles. And so that's that rising to the level of their incompetence piece. And when they're at that point, looking back at that 10,000 hours to become an expert that I was talking about before, it's too late to start. You should have started started that journey, that 10,000 hours. And to put it into perspective, 10,000 hours to become an expert in something is about 3 hours a day for 10 years, 7 days a week. Now, you don't have to do 10,000 hours and become an expert, but you do need to do around, say, 7,000 hours of deliberate training to become proficient. And that's still about 2 hours a day for 10 years. So if you spend 10 years in technical roles and then all of a sudden you're recognised to become a leader of your section or maybe a branch or a division or whatever, and then you start your leadership journey, you're 10,000 hours behind where you should be. And this is where mentoring is really, really good in business, because you can't afford in business necessarily to do what the military does, which is, put people through 2 years of solid training and then have a chaperone to mentor them all the way. But you can start recognising potential leaders early and, setting up some more formal mentoring for those people to help them along the way, so that when they do get to that point of being in a leadership role, they're not starting from a very low base. They're starting from a level of some, experience.
Yeah, in my experience, and this is a while ago, in business, leadership is often thought of as an afterthought, and it's equated with the disciplines, like technical disciplines, of management. Mm. And I see the two as quite separate. Management is about managing things and leadership is about managing people. So the stock and trade of a leader is understanding people. And yet very few people, as you quite rightly said, very few people do any development in that area until they're leading people. And it's too late.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the core of this podcast is really giving insights to business people who are listening. And we know that there's a number of people who are listening who are in leadership roles within businesses now and actually are CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. So can you explain to us how the military trains its leaders and how we in business can learn from that style of leadership training?
Yeah, look, there's the deliberate leadership training. So it's all the normal sort of business leadership, lessons that you would teach anybody around style, the principles, development of character, those sorts of things. But then around the actual experiential learning that goes along with that leadership training and that very specific mentoring that goes along with it. So the military is in a very privileged position in its training continuum, that it has a lot of breadth of training scenarios that it can run, and it has the time and the money to do it. Probably the best thing that business can do is to try to build into its own, career development for people to have the opportunity to lead teams, even if they're not in those roles, so they can get experience of actually leading people.
To both fail and to learn.
In a safe environment to fail and to learn, yes.
And how do you set up that safe environment if you're running a business yourself?
Yeah, look, fantastic question. Could be quite challenging if you wanted to do that on any sort of large scale, but you can always scale these things down and build it into, chaperoning people with somebody else who's doing an actual real project, for example, having somebody to shadow them through that project so that they can actually be, engaged in the process and pick up the skills through experience.
So like you were talking about earlier, like an internal mentoring system.
If the business allows for it, yes. If not, then it's worth looking into some, maybe external mentoring as such. Some professional organisations, I know I'm doing it for AIPM, Australian Institute of Project Managers at the moment, offer, mentoring programs. I'm sure, Ron, you're obviously mentoring a number of people.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that any manager, any leader can help their people. We were talking about it before the podcast that you can learn from watching great leaders. You can also learn from watching lousy leaders, because if you reflect on their practice, and I'm a great believer in the power of reflection and getting people to think about, well, what worked there and what didn't, and how can you take that into your practice? I think that's important, but I think every leader has the responsibility to raise the level of their people in terms of their development, leadership development in particular, because really their responsibility is to replace themselves eventually.
Yeah, definitely.
Or to move up.
Yeah. I personal experience, I lost out on a promotion once on the basis that I was the best man for the job, I thought. But the person who was making the decision said, Ron, fantastic, you can do the job, you're the best man for the job, but we can't replace what you're doing at the moment. because you haven't done anything about developing your people. So do something about that, and then we'll think about it.
That's very interesting.
It was a hard lesson to learn, but probably one of the most important lessons of my life.
You made yourself indispensable.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And anyone who's indispensable can't get out of that.
Yes.
Yes. So a good lesson for leaders, develop your people, otherwise you're stuck.
Yeah. The other thing that I was going to raise was that side conversation we had earlier, Ron, about self-awareness and self-regulation. I think they're two very critical aspects to anyone developing into a leader. And talking about that whole emotional intelligence piece, I mean, in the old days, we used to call emotional intelligence something very different. We called it maturity. And now we've put some technical labels around it, but effectively that's what it is. It's maturity. And one of the ways that people can demonstrate maturity is through the role modeling of other people and seeing what it looks like, what good looks like, and then from there trying to model that themselves. So that's another sort of way that people can try to, I guess it's almost it's like a form of mentoring, but you do it yourself. You identify someone as a role model and you try to replicate what they do.
Well, I think, Ian, I talked about the importance of what leaders currently can do for their people or should be doing for their people. I think if someone wants to be a leader or wants to have that as a potential for their future, they have a responsibility to start thinking about their own development. And that comes with self-reflection, self-regulation, as you say, and being the type of person who thinks about what did I do today and how could I do it better in terms of my relationships with other people.
Now, quick question, and I think we've talked about this before, but can anyone become a leader, Tony?
I always say there are no born leaders. Leaders are shaped by their environment, their conditioning, and the quality of their mentors. And the answer, I think, is can anybody become a leader? I think the answer is yes. Does everybody want to be a leader? I think the answer is no. And also, should everybody be a leader? The answer is probably no. Some people are, the way they develop, the character that they have, the values that they have, and so on, predispose them, I guess, to being better leaders.
So if I'm a young person sitting in a business who's maybe in my 20s and a young professional, and I've got aspirations of leadership, what should I do?
Well, the first thing you should do, I think, is be patient. I think there's
Is that a thing that young people do nowadays? I'm just wondering.
Don't show your age.
That's why I was bringing it up, actually, because there is a propensity in people nowadays to want everything very quickly. And leadership, like I said earlier, leadership is, in a large way, it's to do with your maturity. And maturity, as the word says, takes time. So be patient, observe others, learn from others, and then repeat. So, yeah.
You, however, were thrust into leadership at 17 and a half.
Didn't get everything right.
But you started to
learn. It
learn.
was a huge learning curve. And I had great mentors and I had great training.
So while they're being patient, what should they do? Should they go out and look for mentors? Should they get involved in groups where they can actually get some leadership experience? There's got to be ways. You even mentioned the church earlier. And I know from my background, I'm going to reveal something here. I used to be in the church when I was younger, but I used to refer to where I went because there was about 3,000 or 4,000 people in this church. And I was like, I learned how to run a business by being in that place.
Church is a great sort of organisation for teaching leadership, I think. I look at it from a bottom-up and top-down approach. I think that the individual's got a responsibility to firstly, identify if they feel that they want to be a leader at some point in their life. And a lot of young people don't know what they want. But again, with that 10,000 hours to become an expert, if you think you want it, start looking into it and doing something for yourself. The world won't do it for you. You have to take action. But from a top-down perspective, if you're a leader of an organisation, legacy is important and replacing yourself is important. So, identifying, having an approach to identifying potential future leaders and doing something about it is important.
So what would that approach be from your experience?
I would absolutely make leadership development a key aspect to the business rather than career development, because like I said earlier, I think that, we focus a lot on our career as being the technical skills, and we forget that it also has to include the leadership skills. And Ron said it perfectly. We manage things and we lead people, but what we tend to do is we train people all about the things, and then we throw them, into a situation where they're in charge of people.
That's really interesting, because we want our staff to take responsibility and, take on roles and own them. So leadership development is a really interesting way to think about that.
Absolutely.
And I think if you ask leaders who are currently running businesses and you said, what's the number one problems you have? They won't talk about revenue or marketing. They'll talk about people.
That's funny.
So people problems are the problems that make organizations come unstuck.
I literally just came back from a meeting where I was talking to someone and they were sharing that exact thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the things that we did when I was in the military, and it was actually run by what we call the Padres, and Padres are effectively priests for anyone who doesn't know. They would run character training, and I actually learned a lot from that. Character training, all about what are the great character traits that people should try to develop in themselves. And these are things that used to be common 50, 60, 70 years ago, but seem to be a little bit less common nowadays. They don't have the same intrinsic value as what they used to have, and they're things like courtesy and responsibility, being on time, all the normal things that you can do quite easily. Well, these are the basis, the foundations for being a good leader.
Absolutely right. Well, we've got to start wrapping up now, Tony, but one last question. Given that our audience is mostly senior leaders who are already established within their organizations, why is your message so important to them?
One word, Ron: legacy. I think leaders need to identify potential leaders early and provide them with some deliberate training, but also mentor them. They need to start with the end in mind, and if they want to make sure that they have leaders who are competent and capable to lead when they're appointed, that they have not started their 10,000-hour journey at that time.
Okay, Tony. Well, thank you for your time today. It was insightful and I think a real benefit to both us and our listeners. So if people want to get in touch with you and get some leadership coaching or just make contact, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, well, they can contact me via my website, www.insyncms.com.au, or email me at info@insyncms.com.au, or they can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, pretty easy to find.
Yes, you are. You're everywhere on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And once again, thank you for your time today. It's been a great discussion.
Absolutely. And Tony, that was great. And I've got to admit, I'm sitting here thinking I just want to keep talking about this because some of the things that you've brought out really have kind of dropped little nuggets in my head, particularly around, for me, where you were talking about rather than doing career training, doing leadership training, because that flips that whole thing on its head, because we want to develop leaders who can run our businesses to free up the leaders of the business and the management to actually do what they do best, and that is structure a company that's ready for growth or achieving their goals, whatever that might be. But anyway, we need to wrap up now. So look, if you're finding the Business Builders podcast useful, please let us know. We'd love your thoughts. We'd love to know any topics you'd like to talk about. And you can, of course, reach Ron Tomlian or Brenton Gowland on LinkedIn. We are more than happy to talk to you, and we'd also love you to give us a review if you're listening to this and you're finding it useful. So either on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting platform.
And please remember to check out our sponsors, Nucleus at nucleus.com.au. They're experts in helping your business and telling your story so that you can grow.
Yep.
Please check them out at www.nucleus.com.au.
And please reach out to us if you'd like to get involved with SA Business Builders. Interestingly enough, we just had someone reach out to us today on LinkedIn, and they are now coming to the next event. So until next time, that is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And Tony, we will see you at the next SA Business Builders event.
Looking forward to it, Brenton.
And Ron and our listeners, we look forward to speaking with you again on our next podcast.
See you then, Brenton.
Bye for now, Ron.